Was the Mabul 40 days of rain or 40 days of flood? Now that might seem like it's essentially the same thing, but it really isn't. When it comes to describing the first 40 days of the Mabul, they're the two different psukim that actually seem to contradict. The first pasuk says, first it says there was rain over the land 40 days and 40 nights. And after that, the pasuk says, the Mabul, which is a destructive flood, was 40 days on the earth. Which means that during those 40 days, it wasn't just rain, but it was immediately destructive, chaotic rain called a flood. So which one is it? 40 days of rain, which could be pleasant, or 40 days of devastating flood? Chazal explained, maybe Rashi quotes it as well. When initially they brought the rain that was going to become the flood, initially it was a gentle rain. And the reason was that if they would do tshuva, the rain would actually just turn into the regular, blessed, irrigating rain. Unfortunately, they did not do tshuva. Therefore, it turned into a flood. That's how everybody addresses this issue. So the simple intention of this explanation must be that these two psukim must be describing two different periods of the flood. When it says that there was geshem, there was rain on the earth, it must be right at the beginning when it was still rain. Where there was still the option that if they did tshuva, it would turn into healthy rain. But when it describes the flood, that came after, when they did not do tshuva. When it became clear they were not doing tshuva, then the gentle rain turned into the torrential flood. And that transformation of rain into flood happened on the very first day, because the Torah does say that the Mabul was 40 days. Because as we know, the Midrash tells us that the Mabul was boiling water. So as soon as that Mabul water fell, people didn't survive immediately. Which means that the window of opportunity to do tshuva was extremely short and only on the first day. Great. Sounds like it makes a lot of sense. First it's rain, then it turns into Mabul. However, we're missing something. There's a pasuk over here that doesn't seem to make sense. It's strange. Didn't the first pasuk say clearly that there was rain, not flood, rain, not the searing, boiling Mabul water, but rain for 40 days and 40 nights? Which implies that all 40 days was rain, not just the first few hours. So had it said that the rain was on the land, then you could have answered as follows. Then it would have implied, okay, so it fell as rain, and as it hit the ground, so it turned into this searing, tumultuous flood. In other words, that would imply that as it fell out of the sky all 40 days, as the expression of Chazal was, that when the Eibusher brought down the rain, it will still rain with all the benefits of rain. But once the rain hit the earth, because all of the immorality had occurred on the earth, because all of the chaos of human behavior and even animal behavior was on the earth. That's where the gentle rain turned into a Mabul. Okay? But that's not what the pasuk said. It says that the geshem, the rain, was al ha'aretz, on the land. Which implies not only when it left the clouds was a gentle rain, but even when it hit the ground, it was still geshem, it was still rain. And the pasuk says that occurred for 40 days. So how do you square that off with the fact that it says the Mabul was 40 days? The explanation goes like this. In the pasuk where the Eibishter warns that he's going to bring this Mabul for 40 days and 40 nights. So Chazal tell us, Rashi quotes it, although not verbatim, Rashi identifies why did the Mabul have to originate with 40 days of rain, connected to Savlad because it's the same time frame of the formation of a fetus. Because for 40 days, because of the immorality at the time, there were a lot of mamzerim who were conceived, and 40 days is the time for a fetus to become viable. So therefore, the Mabul had to correlate to those 40 days. So therefore, the fact that the rain of the Mabul fell for 40 days is it's not that each day was an additional punishment. Another day of flood, another day of flood. And it's one long punishment that occurs for 40 days to correspond to one type of behavior that had to do with 40 days. Of Signan Acher, to say it differently, to borrow a phrase from the Ragachava, all 40 days are one concept, one idea. And this fits perfectly with the concept of this being a response to the conception of a child, because those 40 days of the formation of a fetus, it's one process. It's a cell division process that occurs over 40 days until you have a viable fetus. From those 40 days till the end of the 9 months of pregnancy, there are specific aspects of anatomy that are developing, and that's not one single being. Tzuras Evra V'Gida, of the shape and form of the various limbs and the internal organs, which happens piece by piece, or stage by stage, and each one is independent. For example, first is the formation of a hand. Then the hand divides into fingers. Then each finger divides into the segments of the finger. Then you have nails that form on the end of the finger. Of a safe has man mamish, and literally right at the end when the baby's ready to be born, as the Gemara Yevamos tells us, then the nails are finished. Whereas the first 40 days of pregnancy, there's only one thing, one process that occurs. The formation of a basic fetus. So if that's what the Eibishter wants to cleanse, then it makes sense that the 40 days of the flood is one single issue that occurs over 40 days. With that information, you suddenly realize that the two psukim are not at loggerheads. That even when you look from the perspective that initially at the beginning the Eibishter was merciful and made it healthy rain that could have benefited them, where the rain fell in such a way that would they choose to do teshuvah, it could turn into healthy rain. That's actually a description of all of the water for all of the 40 days. It's like the Eibishter allocated the full quantum of how much water was going to fall on the earth over those 40 days, all right at the beginning, initially as Gishmei Bracha. But immediately, as soon as the Eibishter released this water, and it became clear that nobody's doing tshuva, then it became a mabul of 40 days. The water, which was budgeted, which was allocated for 40 days of rain, now all became 40 days of flood. It's the same water. It's the same entity that changes. When you understand that concept, you can see that there's a slight difference in where the 40 appears in the pasuk, whether it's the rain pasuk or the mabul pasuk. The first pasuk tells us there was rain on the earth. And only after that it says, for how long? 40 days and nights. Whereas the second pasuk describing the flooding says, it says that the flood was 40 days al ha'aretz, on the land. Why that distinction? Because the nature of 40 days is different in each of the two psukim. A pasuk vayamabul goimer, the pasuk that describes the flood, is telling us how long the flood lasted. Therefore, it tells us there was a flood and immediately defines for how long. The mabul was 40 days on the earth. And that's practical, because practically the amount of time that there was a surge of water all over the earth increasing more and more flooding was for 40 days. Whereas the pasuk that describes how initially it was rain, that pasuk is not interested in telling us how long the rain lasted. Because rain, which implies the possibility that it could still turn into a positive, healthy experience, was only available right at the beginning, certainly not for 40 days. And as soon as it was evident that nobody's doing tshuva, it immediately became floodwaters. So what's the pasuk looking to tell us? Rather, that pasuk is emphasizing that the rain was on the earth. That means that right at the beginning, as the rain fell onto the ground, it had the potential to be rain of bracha. Except that if they did tshuva. And then the pasuk says that possibility of this being a healthy rain wasn't just for that of those first few drops. That was the possibility for all of the water, all of the rain that was going to fall over the 40 days. Because right from the start, the amount of rainfall that there was enough to flood for 40 days. It's just that they had that very brief moment that they could have changed it. But there's still something we need to explain, because in the idea of 40 days of flooding to correspond to the 40 days of the conception of a fetus, that explains why the 40 devastating days of flooding correspond to the 40 days of producing these mamzerim fetuses. But why would there be any connection between the number 40 days specifically and the potential of these having been healthy rains? To the extent that the Torah is telling us that even the potential healthy rain is 40 days, albeit rolled into one opportunity right at the beginning. So to understand that, let's go a step deeper and remind ourselves what Chassidus says was the purpose of the Mabul. It wasn't destruction, it wasn't punishment. Rather, the Mabul came to purify the earth. Because the earth had become filled with immoral behavior. Chamas, Rashi says, is essentially theft. And the land was very corrupted. It needed to be cleansed. That's why there was a flood, to cleanse it. In the same way as the amount of water that you have to have in a mikveh in order to purify is 40 sa'ah, so the amount of water you needed to purify the world is 40 days worth of flood. That's why Yeshaya Navi calls the Mabul the waters of Noach, meaning Noach is an expression of calm, of resting, of pleasant. This is pleasant both on high and below. Because the punishment aspect of the Mabul is only for the perpetrators who had to be wiped out. But if you look from the perspective of Noach, who's the survivor of the Mabul, and if you look from the perspective of the purpose of the Mabul, it's in order to have a purer, elevated world afterwards. So it's actually positive. That helps us to understand why we're saying that the rain, which is the positive version of how this could have played out, is 40 days. Which means not only could there potentially have been bracha in the rain if they had done tshuva, but throughout all 40 days that the rain fell, it also has a hidden bracha in it. And that's no contradiction to the fact that those same 40 days are this destructive, overwhelming flood. Because the deeper meaning behind the Mabul, devastating as it is to achieve peace in the world, to achieve goodness in the world, to achieve purity in the world. Which means that every single day of the flood, both things are happening. The flood is cleansing the world, and destroying everything that exists. You can actually see it in the word Mabul, because Mabul hu melishayin bull. Mabul is related to the word bull. The word bull is a word the Gemara uses based on a pasuk to refer to healthy rains. Like the pasuk says about the inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash, or the continuation of the celebrations, the process of building the Beis Hamikdash in the month of Cheshvan, calls it the month of Bul. So it's the time, the pasuk is referring to the month of Cheshvan, which is the time of healthy rains in Israel. Says the Gemara, how do you get from Bul to rain? It's when you get these big bubbles of water on the ground from the rain. And therefore we could say that the 40 days of the bracha aspect of the rain is also one essence, one process. Because the 40 days of purifying the world correspond to the 40 units that make up a mikveh. And as the Rogatchover goes in great detail to explain, the 40 sa'ah of the mikveh, that is one entity, one purifying entity. So in the same way, the 40 days of Gishmei Bracha is one purifying entity for the world. Now, bracha it's this bracha about the mabul that it purifies the world. Is also alluded to in the Maimon Chazal we said before. Initially, when the Eibishter brought down the waters that were going to be the rains of the flood, he brought it with rachamim, with mercy. In order to tell the world, if you do tshuva, I'll accept your tshuva and I'll save you. That if you do tshuva, this rain will actually be to your benefit. All the corruption in the world prior to the Mabul degraded the world to such an extent that it wasn't possible to rehabilitate. That's why the people of the Dera Mabul could not do tshuva. It's not just that they did not do tshuva, they were so far gone, there was no way to get them back. The Mabul then changed the reality of the world. The Tahir Sa'aretz purified the earth. And that empowered the world in which we live to have the ability for tshuva. As Chazal say, the Eibishter wanted to show the world from here on out, if you do tshuva, we'll accept you. That's the deeper meaning of the pasuk saying the rain was on the earth. Even though the people of that generation did not do tshuva, and therefore for them it became a devastating, destructive flood. But those same rains of bracha that the Eibishter wanted to bring in a compassionate way, they didn't stay up in the heavens and never came part of this world. They fell to the ground and they made an impact on the ground. They irrigated the earth to have the capacity for tshuva. And that obviously would give the capacity to actually neutralize the ill effects of the mabul and have turned it potentially into Gishmei Bracha. We see something similar, as the Yalkut Shimoni tells us, about these 40 days of the flood. That every year for 40 days there's an impact from the waters of the flood that still affects the world. And that went on for generations. Until Shlomo Melech built the Beis Hamikdash, and then those 40 days of devastation stopped. And that's actually why the name of Cheshvan, the raining month, is called Bul. It's like the word Mabul with the mem, which it represents the 40 days, the destructive days, being removed from it. And instead of having the destructive flood waters, now you've got, thanks to Shlomo Melech building the Beis Hamikdash, only the rain of bracha. And that's really what the Eibishter intended all along with the flood, is that the goal shouldn't be a flood, the goal should be the bracha that follows it, the tshuva that follows it. Once Shlomo Melech built the Beis Hamikdash, that changed the world and that refined the world. Or Shel Mikdash, that illuminated the world with the light of the Beis Hamikdash, with the uniquely designed windows of the Beis Hamikdash which generate light and radiate light outwards. All of the residue of the mabul and the negativity associated with it was now cleansed, and all that's left is the bull, the rain of bracha. That's how it was in the time of Shlomo HaMelech, but we're not where we need to be yet. Shleimus Taras Haaretz Tili Yosid Lavei, the full purification of the world will only be in the time of Mashiach. She'oz yeh b'yadeinu l'rak bul, ela gam ha'mem shel mabul tisafech l'tov. Then not only will we extract out the Gishmei Bracha from the mabul, but we'll actually take the mem that used to belong to mabul and we'll turn it into something positive. Because the 40 days of flood, which correspond to the 40 units of a mikveh, they're associated with a closed mem. Think about it, a mikveh obviously surrounds the person completely, and likewise there's the 40 days of the mabul, in a sense, are like this closed mem. And that closed mem is something that Chassidus explains was experienced in the Teva. Now, what is a closed mem? It's the power to be able to turn around the mem of mabul, which is a regular open mem, which is a symbol of golus. There's always the possibility of things breaking down and going out of the space into golus again. Shetiyah mem stuma should become a closed mem, where there's no way to leave. And a closed mem represents geula. As the pasuk says in Yeshaya, that there'll be this that the marba mishra, which is an unusual spelling, where in the beginning of a word you've got a closed mem. That implies that the great peace and the great strength that we'll have in the time of Mashiach is represented by the closed mem. That should happen. That should happen with the complete geula with Mashiach immediately now.